Right then, so another vlog that maybe is not timed too well. We try not to start a vlog when a car's in a million bits, but it started getting to the point where a little bit of routine maintenance has turned a little bit busy, should I say. So it's the KTM, this is the crossbow. Some people call it X-Bow, I think it's crossbow, but anyway. We've had this a fair while and put up quite a few pictures of it, quite a few videos. I think we've probably done 10 track days in it or something like that. Done quite a bit of use, and we have really enjoyed it. I did film another video previously, but the sort of aim of the video and what ended up happening didn't quite work out, and there's been a lot of stuff gone on since then. So I thought, rather than sort of trying to tag this on the end of another video, start a different one, this is going to be the start of what we're doing on this. We're going to bit of different ideas how we're going to do things. But anyway, so not a lot of people know KTM's owned by Volkswagen or the VW group. So this shares quite a lot of parts with, they say Audi, but it's Volkswagen really. So we'll have a quick look at what we can see and a quick talk about what we're doing, and it'll sort of resonate to a lot of people because it's basically just a TFSI engine. So I've not really got a plan on how we're going to talk about this, so we'll just look at stuff and talk about it. So the wheels on this are some absolutely scruffy because Scott were driving it when they were salting roads last time. Forged KTM wheels, which these were an absolute fortune. I think about £6 or something stupid like that. And when we got the car, it had 888, Toyo 888s on, but we prefer these AO52s, which these have done, I think, 6 track days. So now they're starting to wear on the outer shoulder, which is where they normally go. Everything else looks absolutely fine. So if you're really tight, you could probably just flip these around and not drive it in wet with tread going wrong way. But yeah, they're on the way out. But them tyres made this car even better than it already was. So that's the wheels and tyres, which these are 18s on the back, and this is a 265 tyre, and they're only 17s on the front. That's a 225. So yeah, quite interesting how they stagger that. Makes it a bit of a pain for rotating tyres, but anyway. So as you can see, the engine cover, just a TFSI airbox / engine cover. So it did have this ram air filter on it with an homemade box, which this is not factory KTM at all, but I think we're going to replace all this just with the standard stuff and just see if it makes any difference, because I'm not a big fan of that setup, but we'll see if it works. So onto the inlet. So we have changed the pressure regulator to the RS4 / Audi R8 one, because this has got a little filter inside and a little ball and spring, which this literally just, the high pressure pump pressurizes the rail like it would on a diesel, and then that's like the relief valve that will just constantly maintain the rail pressure. I think this is 155 bar, 145, and they're 125 or 115, whatever, depending on the model number. But we've just put that in because we have tuned it already, and we've seen a couple of instances of a low pressure fault code, which it could be an hardware problem, but while we had it all in bits, we thought we'd do this. So inside of the inlet, it's dirty, but not coked up by any stretch. So I think we're gonna just clean that out with some brake cleaner, and that should be absolutely fine. The breather system, which I know a lot of people delete these and get rid of them, I don't think we're going to do anything with it just yet, but it'll be on the cars to do something with that if we do have any problems. I think this has only done 6,000 miles, something like that, so it's not really had a ton of use. But anyway, carbon panels. This is what Danny said we should be looking at. Well, this is one of the pieces of bodywork that has been modified to have that knacker duct in there, carbon fibre one, to go to the air filter. So we'll try and utilise that if we can. But they're stupidly light and scruffy. It's all raw carbon fibre underneath. But yeah, we did plan on wrapping this, but I'm not sure we're going to do it just yet. Yeah, then these are all the unfinished carbon panels, which these will be an absolute fortune. So that sits on the top like that behind the driver. Yeah, really nice quality stuff. It's all really good. And then that's the diffuser, which we'll have a look further at that later on, but you can see spinning the gravel. That's damaged it a tiny little bit there, but that's nothing that we can't touch up. It's got a sharper leading edge on it now, but that's the problem with track cars. They get used. So this initially started out as just literally swapping the brake discs and pads. So these are the used rears, which the pads are not too bad. Not quite sure what they actually are. I think they are RST3s, the same as this, which are Pagid RST3, which is the same as what we're running the Golf at the minute. Choice of RST3s or RS29s, they work really good. But anyway, so the rear discs, these are still sort of Volkswagen fitment 5x100. It's 5x112 Mark 5 fitment, but they're a funny size. So these are only available from KTM. Same for the fronts, you can only buy them from KTM. So the Brembo discs with a groove in them, you can only get them from there. So these pads, we'll keep them as spares. They look a bit scabby, but they've still got plenty of meat on them, no cracks or whatever really. They're absolutely fine. This is the handbrake pads, which they're just motorbike brake pads, which they're gone. Might have been when I left handbrake on when I was driving it one at times. I'm not sure whether it was gone already, but that's them. So we're having the same pads all round, which you can see the setup on the rear is a 2-pot, quite low down, and then this little sort of just handbrake caliper here. So literally that just, the handbrake cable just pulls on that. Now what is quite interesting, this hub is just the front hub, the wheel bearing is just from the front of a Mark 5 Golf, Mark 5, Mark 6 Golf. So it's in a custom hub that's got all this fully machined setup, ready for the double wishbone suspension, but the actual wheel bearing, just factory, as is the dry shaft. So there's no custom stuff in there. And everything off this car must be repurposed from other stuff. Obviously the hard components, obviously the chassis is not, but anyway. So, as you can see, the engine is just a TFSI. I don't know where Danny's going to get in here. And the ports, we took the inlet off to do the pressure regulator valve, but we did want to have a good look in there and see what the ports were like. I think you're not even looking at it, Danny, here. It's not as bad as it could be. So we're just literally going to clean that out with some brake cleaner and away you go. But because we've got the bodywork off, we can have a little bit better look at what's going on here. But basically, that is just, in essence, from what I can find with the part numbers, everything on this is just like a Golf Mark 5 Edition 30. So the gearbox is just a front wheel drive, Golf Edition 30 gearbox. It has got a plate diffing that's, I don't know, I think it might be Drexler who manufactures that. It'll be some German company anyway, it's definitely not going to be sourced from anywhere else, which is why we put in the Castrol limited slip diff oil, which is what we use in our Golf as well, running the plate diff. So we're putting that in there while we're doing this maintenance. And the engine oil's not come yet, but that is literally just Castrol Edge 1060, which is what like M3s and stuff like that run. So it's not too fancy, it's not cheap, but it's not unobtainable stuff. So yeah, it should be fairly straightforward. So you can't really see much. You've got a nice KTM exhaust, which it should be stainless, but it can't be the best quality stainless because it's getting little bits of rust on it, but that's the salt. All this bolts to the rear of the chassis members that come back. So that's the only steel bit on the chassis where the engine bolts to. But if you just get underneath, you can see what they've done with the gear cables as well. They just literally come all the way from the front, all the way underneath. There's not really too fancy going on there. Got a fancy little dog bone mount on there, but they do have they do an engine kit that lowers the engine by, I think it's another 30 mil or something like that, which you need a different dog bone, a different subframe mount and different mounts at the top. But underneath, it's pretty much a Golf GTI. There's nothing too fancy. That there is a charge cooler, which this is an upgraded one. I think it's a Pro Alloy or something like that. But that's an upgraded one because these were common on the early generations for leaking. But it's it works pretty well. So then on to the radiator cooling system. Obviously it's got the charge cooler, so you've got two radiators. The front one does the charge cooler, the rear one does the engine radiator, and you've got one at each side as well. And they're just literally running series, which I thought it quite odd how they did it like that. I'm not sure what the thought process is. I'd have thought you'd have two completely separate ones and just have charge at one side and engine at the other, and then you got all the heat coming out of one radiator. But maybe this is just to get the capacity there, but I don't know. They know more about keeping engines cool than we do. I'm sure some people with KTM motorbikes will say the opposite, because I know some of them have a tendency to overheat. But anyway, so yeah, this, basically the rear subframe is all bolted to the chassis. So in theory, if you wanted to be crazy, you could unbolt this rear subframe and bolt whatever you wanted on, put a V10, V12 at the back if you wanted to go crazy and make your own rear suspension. But that's not what we're going to do. We're not going to do something that crazy. But just like you can see, it's just a parts bin car, literally just Golf header tank. All the alternator, everything's all standard. Everything, the engine mount's just a standard engine mount. Nothing too crazy going on there. The suspension on the rear is pretty conventional as far as dual wishbones go. Nothing too fancy there. All the interesting stuff's going on at the front. But we'll not do a rundown on the car because it's so upside down at the minute. We're doing the video the opposite way around. When it's all back on the deck and all the panels are back on, we'll have a look inside the cabin and at the front, and obviously put some videos up of it going around track and stuff. But the other thing that I meant to mention and forgot about is the service parts are just use genuine Volkswagen service parts. Don't need to do it too fancy. Don't have to order them directly from KTM. You just have to know the part numbers of the parts that you're wanting. So I'll let Paul finish doing what he's doing. I'm going to do the engine oil, obviously all the filters, the gearbox oil, the brakes. Then give it a good clean because it's absolutely filthy. Then once we've done that, if we're still allowed to, we'll go for a little run on the road, and I'll put some videos of it up on track. Stay tuned. So, some that weren't really planned, because I said next video we'd have it outside and cleaned and what have you, but I didn't realise Paul was going to be taking this front end off. So what this is just literally a crash structure. It also serves another purpose, that it holds lights and splitter. But this is designed if you have a little crash on front that it'll just fold up. I think it's about 40 or 50 mile an hour, something like that. If you hit something with that, you'll not compromise any integrity at chassis, so you don't need to send it off for checking and straightening out and what have you. But as well, the oil's here, so Paul can finally put that in. So this is probably way over-egged for what we're needing, but people put 1050s in it as well, which would use rock oil for doing that, but it's always had that in, so we'll always put that in. But the reason for taking the front off, we've been taking all these suspension arms off to grease is all like circlips, all these covers on, and all bearings and bushings and everything that want grease on them. So to get these off, is it a nut on the other side of these ones? Is that what it was? Yeah.
Nut on the back 3 bolts, front one is captive.
Yeah, so that one's captive, but then these 3 are not. And to get into the pedal box, which is down here, and get to them, it'd have been absolutely painful without taking this front end off. So that's why we've done it. But it gets you a really nice view at how the suspension works. And again, this is a Mark 5 front wheel bearing, but it's got like a fake sort of cap. You can't really see it from there, but it's basically got like a fake CV in there that holds it all together, but it's obviously on its own custom machined up. But you can see, obviously got your lower wishbone, your upper wishbone, and then you've got your push rod, which then goes to all this arrangement for your inboard shock and spring. So basically, rather than it going up and down and squashing a spring here like you would on a McPherson strut, you're obviously actuating the suspension here, which you can change. It's not on this, but on a lot of cars you can have adjustable for the ratio. So instead of changing the spring rate, you'd just change where the lever is. So then you'd end up with a different ratio from your arm to your suspension. But we've not got that adjustability on here, but that's why they do that. You've got a lot more control over how things work, and obviously the anti-roll bar comes off that as well. So it's got a nice sleek, so these are sort of quite aerodynamic arms. Obviously not like a Formula One that's actually creating any downforce or that, but they're quite oval, so they're not a cheap item really. But basically, while all this were off, we've greased everything up that could possibly need greasing. Checked all the nuts and bolts and everything around here, so all the pedal boxes all been tightened up. And another interesting thing, you can see it just there. This is literally just a standard Mark 5, Mark 6 Golf clutch master cylinder. And that's got the sensor built in for the clutch being depressed. So that's part of the starting procedure on this, clutch, brake, all that sort of carry on. So that's all interlocked. And then yeah, see manual steering rack, no power steering on this at all. Yeah, it's quite an interesting car. Everything's been done in very sort of cost-effective ways, even though it all costs an absolute fortune. But sort of the maintenance that this has had is what we'd expect a customer who's had this car for a few thousand miles would want. You want a full strip down, clean everything out, grease everything up, change all the fluids, but it's very labour intensive. I think we're probably 20 hours deep or something like that now to do the disc pads and all that little bit of maintenance, so it's quite a lot of work. But these are not a cheap car, 100 grand, something like that by the time you've stuck a few options on, so it needs to be done right. But yeah, it's been a lot of work. So hopefully the next video, it's clean, it's outside, and we'll go for a drive. So finally had a chance to get it all back together. It took absolutely ages to do all these little bits, but it's all maintained now, all ready for another go out on track. So one of the things, it's why it's ticking over at the minute, going to let it warm up, but one of the things we noticed when we're servicing it as well, which we'll put a picture of that up, because the oil's so thick on this, if you give it some revs when it's cold, it's going to try and suck the oil filter in on itself. So that's one of the reasons why they tell people not to be putting too thick oil in or so heavier weight oil in a car. We are doing some testing first, so whether we did it or when the previous owner had it, I'm not too sure, but it's sucked in on itself, and we're going to make sure we take it out periodically and just see if it's done that again. But anyway, so I think everything's on there. It looks a lot better with bodywork all back on. Harry gave it a nice clean, looks a ton better. I think the only other thing to do is take it out for a quick run. Then we'll swap the rear tyres because these get a little bit too sticky on the dyno. Not bad if you're doing just a before and after, but we want to just see what power it actually does. So we'll put the wet weather tyres on, which is some Uniroyal Rain Sports, and see what they do. And I don't think you can see, you can just see it there. We'll put a picture up of the CAD design, but we CAD'd up a little adapter to go from the standard sort of square airbox intake to the NACA duct on the side. And we 3D printed these up for when we're on track as well. These little interface, so it goes onto a GoPro stick-on mount to the Race Logic camera mount as well. But we don't need that for what I'm doing now, so I'll take that off. And yeah, we just need to get some cameras in it and go for a little drive. So we can finally get out in the KTM. Ignore Tom, he's not really here. He's my laptop man.
I've been imported.
Yeah. He's not meant to be laughing, I've told him not to laugh. But we're just going to do some logs and make sure it's healthy, because from some of the logs we've seen before, it's probably not as healthy as we want it to be. Or at least the tune's not as good as we want it to be. So we got the log we needed anyway. Just trying to make sure the timing and the fuel pressure and everything's doing what it should be doing. One thing about this car, it'd be nice if it had a sun visor. But the one good thing about these, people said this one's ugly because it's the GT, which means it's got a windscreen. But there'd be no way if we didn't have a windscreen or these sort of doors that we'd be able to have a conversation while we were driving it. We'd have to have his helmets on, so I don't think it's a bad thing.
I'm logging.
Yeah. This car's just ridiculously easy to drive, and fourth gear acceleration's like second in most cars.
If that.
Like it's just 2,000 RPM in fourth. You know. Not slow, is it, Tom?
Oh, no. I love it. This thing is hilarious.
It's just raw.
So
No
raw.
power steering,
No
ABS, no traction control, but
I can tell you can just touch the steering.
Oh, yeah,
it just goes. It just goes. How are the brakes?
brakes are good. It's had new brakes, so we need to bed them in, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that concludes the road test anyway. I don't want to do anything too crazy. We don't like driving like idiots on road. We've got plenty of videos that we'll stick in where we can of driving this on track and doing what we need to do.